first. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Bailey, go ahead.
Thousands of adults in Central Illinois lack their GED or need short-term vocational programs to gain employment. These individuals are often in the hard-to-serve population that would not be ready for community college. How would you support adult education, and how important to you is that support?
Well, we have to get funding back to education. There's no question about it. You take a look at the state's budget, and if you take a look in particular at the General Revenue Fund, we've increased spending by $5 billion over the past 2 years. Unfortunately, education's not getting its fair share, and I believe adult education in particular. If you take a look at that General Revenue Fund, welfare is actually getting a larger piece of that pie than education K through 12. That's unfortunate, and I think it needs to change.
I have personally attended the graduation ceremonies of those who are receiving their GED diplomas. I understand how important it is to them and their families. I've watched them with joy as many of those who had dropped out of school had been able to find a way to get themselves back into a world where they're able to get a good education and get a job. And that GED diploma means everything. I believe that it's very important that we continue to fund the GED program, and in addition to that, so that we may not need as many of these kinds of programs in the future, it's vitally important that we continue to fund the early childhood education program, which most educators would say is one of the best programs for making sure that our children stay in school and succeed in school throughout their entire career. So hopefully, as they're reaching the junior high years and the high school years, they're succeeding to a point where they may not feel like they need to drop out.
Scott, you have a question for Representative Flider?
I do. Representative Flider, people are leaving the area due to unemployment. Unemployment rates remain high. Businesses have had trouble staying open. How do you plan on supporting ways to make Illinois both more business friendly and jobs friendly, and how are you going to work to bring more jobs and more businesses to our area?
We have, in the General Assembly, I've co-sponsored legislation, and we've passed legislation that provides incentives for businesses to want to invest and stay here. These are at the request of companies like Caterpillar and other manufacturers. We are very fortunate here in Decatur and Central Illinois to have companies like Archer Daniels Midland, Tate & Lyle, who are working very hard as a community to make sure that those jobs stay here, and other companies. Mueller Manufacturing, Mueller Company is now has hired people back, and they are going full steam ahead. I'm glad to hear that. But the most important thing we need to do is make sure that we can look at the things that are important to businesses. We need to keep our taxes low, keep their cost of business doing low, and I do think we need to look at workers' compensation costs and make sure that we as a state are addressing those. And there's a system in place in Springfield that where the business and labor would sit down and negotiate changes, and I think it's high time we get that done.
Well, here in Illinois last year we lost 240,000 jobs. A lot of that due to a bad jobs climate here in Illinois. We need to push workers' compensation reform. Over in Indiana, they pay half what we pay out in workers' comp each year. Also, we need lawsuit abuse reform to help provide for small businesses the opportunity to run a good business. And we need to get jobs back here. And that's not a simple thing to do when you have a $13 billion deficit because businesses want stability, they want predictability. So it's going to take a long time to bring those businesses back and bring employment back here to Illinois. But we're in it for the long haul. And I'm proud to say I was endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business, which is the voice of small business here in Illinois, because they believe I can get that job done.
Bailey's question will be directed toward you, Mr. Round, first.
Teenagers especially are challenged to find jobs in this economy, which impacts their ability to save money for college. What would you do to help teenagers find jobs?
Well, I've worked on my family farm. I actually work on my family's corn and soybean, 5th generation family farm. And I started as a teenager. And I love the opportunity. It builds a lot of character. It builds upon the tradition that's been there in my past. And it's a lifelong lesson for teenagers to get jobs and learn what the real world is all about. Because you go to school, you look at these books, and you learn what you're supposed to encounter in the work world. But when you actually get out there, get on the job, you learn quite a bit more. So we need to get these jobs back to teenagers. We need to get these jobs for everyone's sake. Not only to pay our bills, but to educate for the long term. You can't start young enough learning, and we've got to really get those jobs back. But it starts young, and I apologize.
Representative Flider, would you also like to answer that question?
Sure. Teenagers certainly have to have an incentive to want to work as well. I recall I was about 12 years old. I started bussing tables in my grandfather's restaurant when I was younger. And I was a janitor. I pumped gasoline. I sacked groceries. Did a number of different things throughout my youth. And it'd be important to find opportunities like that for our youth. And we actually have worked toward that goal in our area. I was very proud to work with one of our communities, the City of Sullivan, in their school district. They have an incredible community education program that I'd like to see blossom throughout the entire state. And what they do is they not only get kids involved in the community who are in high school, show them the importance of volunteerism, but they also pair them up with some of the businesses in that community where they can actually earn a little bit of money and learn all about what citizenship and what holding a job really means, and so that when they graduate, hopefully they would have better skills in the future.
I believe Chris's question is next, and that would be directed toward you, Representative Flider.
People are concerned about misappropriation of funds in light of recent political scandals faced by the state of Illinois. Representative Flider, you have recently received some criticism on your position of inaction on House Resolution 1057. The resolution would require the Illinois Auditor General to perform a forensic audit on a large portion of the state's finances, including spending, hiring, procurement, and the like during the Blagojevich administration. My question is, could you please explain your position on a statewide audit?
Yes, in press releases and other communications, I've been accused of voting against the forensic audit. The fact of the matter is, the forensic audit actually never came up for a vote. What came up for a vote was sort of a motion to try and get it to where it was bypassing committee and onto the floor for full consideration. One of the most important reasons that you have a committee process is that this forensic audit, as described by the Attorney General, would require about 135 million different review processes to occur. And in his mind would cost a mind-boggling, astronomical hundreds of millions of dollars in order to implement. So I support a line-by-line review of the budget. I think that's the approach that we need to take. I've also worked with the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit to ensure that we are not spending dollars inappropriately, and we could recapture that. And then lastly, I want to make sure that, thank you for your time.
Well, my question is, what do we have to hide in the state's budget? We have to stress accountability right now more than ever. With a $13 billion deficit, House Bill 1057 was the perfect opportunity to open up the books. The public needs to have a transparent government to look to. Unfortunately, we don't have that currently. A line-by-line audit would be great. Kansas and Texas, as I mentioned earlier, both have implemented this policy, and it's very needed right here in Illinois as well.
Councilman Brown, this question is going to be directed to you.
On July 9th, in an article written by Huey Freeman in the Decatur Herald and Review, you supported an Arizona-like anti-immigration bill, going as far as being quoted, "They're criminals," referring to undocumented workers. If a bill like this comes to pass in Illinois, how do you think it will help the state? And moreover, do you believe that the state can bear the cost of its enforcement?
As I mentioned earlier, we have to rein in spending here in Illinois. Across the state of Illinois, We paid out last year to illegal immigrants $4.9 billion. If you take a look at Blagojevich's All Kids program as well, 75% of that goes to illegals. That's wasteful. $50 million is the cost of that program to our residents each year.
We know that the federal government is woefully inadequate in terms of monitoring those who are here illegally. And not only do I believe that the federal government needs to patrol the borders better than it has, I also believe that federal government needs to find ways to hold employers accountable for employing illegal immigrants. After all, there's one reason they're here, is to earn a living. And they're taking Americans' jobs. They're taking workers' jobs here who otherwise might be employed. So who's employing them? Well, the employers who are employing them need to be held accountable. It's that simple. And I think that's extremely important. And if the federal government will not do its job, then we need the authority in Illinois to be able to do it so that we can put Illinois workers back to work.
Mr. Brown, the next question is for you.
The 101st District is obviously south of Interstate 80. How will you work with Chicago area politicians to get legislation passed that will specifically benefit Central Illinois?
Well, I think the influence of Chicago area politicians is much too great here downstate. And I think this November we're going to see a new wave of candidates actually coming through on the ballot and making it into office in January. Therefore, I think we'll have a consensus of fresh ideas and new people there who are willing to work together across party lines and get things done for the good of all.
Well, it's really a shame that we're not working across party lines today like we should be. You know, one side goes one way, one goes another. I think the people we represent expect both Republicans and Democrats to work together, and what a travesty that is. But I can tell you there's been instances where Chicago legislators have wanted to move forward on a bill, and downstate legislators have stopped that to ensure that we were able to obtain some benefits for downstate. So for example, with the Chicago transit bill a couple of years ago, we were able to make sure that here in Decatur, we were able to receive $500,000 more for our system over the previous years. You know, if other systems in Northern Illinois should benefit, then the downstate should benefit too. That's an example of how we need to leverage our strength as downstaters. But I think people need to work together, bottom line. The capital bill that we see, the people you see working here, the millions of dollars in road construction and bridge construction, the Richland Community College Student Success Center, those are all funded as a result of the capital construction bill. Thank you.